For more on this, let's bring in Stephen Wallace. He's the former FAA Director of Accident Investigation, and he is with us now from Washington. Thanks so much for being with us, Stephen.
Thank you.
It is rare, as people know, for passenger planes to crash. Ethiopian Airlines was considered one of the world-class airlines by everyone, not just in Africa, but around the world. Very strong safety record. Based on your experience, what should the focus of the investigation be to determine the exact cause of the crash?
Well, you're correct about Ethiopian Airlines it was basically started with a great deal of help in the 1960s by Trans World Airlines, went over there and helped them set it up. So it is certainly a well-respected airline. So early in the investigation, everything is on the table. We have recovered both recorders, the late model airplane with absolutely top-of-the-line flight data recorders, which would record hundreds of parameters, and cockpit voice recorders. So they have very good evidence. Interesting to note one fact is that the wreckage was described as being in an area the size of a basketball court. Well, that would certainly tell you that the airplane came in probably nearly vertically. But everything's on the table on day one, and the best experts in the world are on their way to assist the Ethiopian government.
You know, when we heard about this crash and we heard that the plane was a Boeing 737 MAX 8, everyone thought of Lion Air and the disaster that happened there, and whether or not this type of plane is safe. What do we know about this plane so far?
Well, with an impeccable safety record, and then we had the Lion Air accident where they have a very good idea what happened there with an angle of attack sensor and this modification to the 737 MAX series that where there's a control law change where the airplane can be pitched downward because of a tendency of the airplane, because of its larger and more forward engines, to pitch up in certain flight attitudes. So they know what happened and what could have prevented the accident with Lion Air. Now, investigators don't want to speculate or jump to conclusions, but they certainly have the Lion Air factual scenario in their minds. So there will be a hyper focus on that.
But Stephen, this is a pretty new plane for Boeing. I mean, I don't know how these sort of things work. You know, Vlad, when you think about a brand new car coming out, sometimes you want to wait until the kinks are worked out. Mm-hmm. You know, is it the same for planes? I imagine that they would have to go through some sort of thorough testing before they start selling them to airlines.
Well, they absolutely do. Now, this airplane's been out for 2 years, but it's a variant of a 737 that's been out since 1967 with more than 10,000 out there. There are about 350 of these MAX models out already, but so when they make a new version of an airplane, the FAA aircraft certification people very tightly focus on anything that's new or changed. So this airplane went through a very thorough flight test program and back when it was certified in 2017.
You know, Stephen, the 737, as our audience and you will very well be aware, is the workhorse of all of the world's major carriers. I mean, I think we've probably flown more 737s in our lifetime than any other aircraft. But I do wonder, as Anne-Marie was pointing out, with this 737 MAX 8 plane, the fact that they've had two major crashes in a very short period of time, it reminds me a bit of the Concorde crash back in 2000, I think it was, where that aircraft had never had a crash until then, and all of a sudden, the safety record is now skewed because of that one crash. I mean, are we looking at the same thing here?
Well, I mean, I would point out that the Concorde there were just so few of them that the per-departure accident rate went from being perfect to being the worst with one accident, because there were only about 16 of them operated as opposed to almost 11,000 737s. So they don't actually compare. But again, there was with Lion Air, there was something wrong with the airplane. It was also manageable if the correct procedure procedure had been followed. So the world airlines learned from that. Certainly, they could see that, you know, it had what's called like a trim runaway, where there was just a selector switch to turn that system off and hand fly the airplane. That's Lion Air. Now, we should not jump to the conclusion that this accident was, you know, the same cause as Lion Air, but Lion Air is certainly in the minds of the investigators.
Yeah, no, your point is taken. I didn't mean to suggest of all the 737s. I just thought meant the 737 MAX 8s. So then I wonder then, are these pilots being trained? I know we've done several stories in the past where we go into simulators, flight simulators with pilots, and they replicate the conditions that caused a previous crash, and they watch the pilots go through the steps that are needed to be taken to prevent a fatality or a crash. What's happening with these other pilots in these other countries? Are they going through that training that Boeing provides?
I would certainly think so. And training is now done virtually 100% in simulators, because they simulate the airplane perfectly, and you can put the pilots into scenarios that would be extremely dangerous in an actual airplane, but you can do it safely in a simulator. So you're correct. I certainly believe that the world's developed airlines and these 737 MAXs really aren't being flown by anything other than developed airlines, and so simulator training with full motion visual simulators, I mean, that is a huge boon to safety, and I would certainly expect that airlines would have trained on this scenario, just as they taught pilots to fly through wind shear. We used to have wind shear accidents. We haven't had one in decades, because pilots were taught to fly airplanes in ways that they normally never would. Firewall the engines, pitch them up high, and things that, you know, invaluable training that would be too dangerous to do in the airplane. So the short answer to your question is yes, I certainly would expect that this exact scenario would be run through in training programs.
Well, that's pretty good. I think a lot of people are thinking about their summer vacations and planning and wondering what plane are they going to be on.
It's just normal human reaction. You're like, wow, this plane, 2 accidents in a couple of months. I'm a little worried. Even though I know statistically they shouldn't be.
Right. Steve Wallace, thank you so much.
Thank you.